Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for TechUcation 2020. My name is Todd Lotchbike. I'm the Director of Employer and Alumni Relations within the Career Center. I'm very happy to have everybody here. This is now the third year that we are producing the TechUcation event. Obviously, it's a little bit different because everything in 2020 is a little bit different. But what we've attempted to do is gather a group of diverse tech professionals, both alumni and non-alumni, to talk about the technology industry, computer science, and the various career paths that might possibly await you once you graduate. The format of the evening will first be a keynote from our very distinguished guest, who I'll introduce in 1 second. And then it will be followed by a technology panel comprised of three alumni, two from Stern College for Women and one from Yeshiva College, and also a tech recruiter from Broadridge Financial Solutions. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our keynote, Ilya Epstein. Ilya has been working in the tech industry for nearly 20 years, starting his career as a network engineer at IDT before moving to GraphNet as the sales engineering manager, and then Kanoa Software as the director of global sales engineering. For the past 5 years, he's worked at Amazon Web Services, and his current role is Principal Solutions Architect. To be honest, I'm pretty excited to learn exactly what that means. So now I will turn it over to Ilya.
Thank you so much, Todd. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys. I know kind of, looking back at my college days, I would have appreciated having a program like this. So this is actually awesome. We didn't have this back when I was at YU, as far as I know. So yeah, this is awesome. And, want to make this interactive. The goal of today's session, what I want to try to do is, give you a little bit of a background of kind of my, I'll call it my journey to the cloud. I also want to talk a little bit about, I just called it introverted engineer versus extroverted engineer. It's a little bit about different types of roles in technology, right? So sometimes when you're, computer science major, you may be thinking about software development engineering roles, which is great. But I just want to give you a little bit of a background and kind of, a foray, a view of, what's really available there in the industry in terms of technology. And then I have a couple of sections here on what I called stuff you should be learning in school. Kind of from my perspective, kind of looking back, what are some of the priorities I think in terms of the education that you should be getting, and also what you should be doing on your own. I think there's a lot of opportunity to supplement what you're doing in the classroom with some, amazing, things that are available relatively inexpensively. So I want to make sure that we cover that as well. I also had an opportunity to speak to our student program team, and I added towards the end, I'll added a little bit of information about kind of internship opportunities at Amazon and AWS as well. So hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about that also. So a little bit about kind of my journey, right? So I started out actually in YU in 1999. I had to remember all the dates because I wasn't sure exactly, had to kind of work backwards. I majored in data communications. For kind of semi-personal reasons, I transferred over to Lander College for Men and kind of continued that track, right? Information systems. So I didn't major in computer science. I had that blended degree, which mixes basically computer science with a lot of kind of business courses, right? So everything from accounting to marketing, data, and some of the business courses that I was able to take. I just wanted to call out, I did have a couple of, kind of jobs throughout, my college days. I did work in a computer science lab as a lab administrator, which, I'll talk a little bit about it. It definitely gave me some hands-on experience, which was very helpful, running, pretty sizable network at Landon College, which was beneficial. And I did have an internship, which I think is super important. I'll talk more about it. I worked at a company called Kyodex, which is now SunGuard Trading, on their commodities risk platform. Then when I graduated, looked for a job for a while. I always had a little bit of a passion for networking, spent a little bit of time at IDT in a network engineering space. And then I actually had an opportunity to do a little bit of development there as well. IDT basically spun off a few startups that was leveraging their telephony technology to do other interesting things back then, including some of the first integrations with mapping software. And there was an opportunity to do a little bit of C# development, so I took that and spent there a little bit over a year. And then I had this opportunity to join this company called GraphNet in sales engineering. And I'll talk a little bit more about it, but I didn't really know what sales engineering is, but it sounded interesting. It sounded like a blend between technology and business. And they were offering a pretty unique product, all kind of SaaS based, before really cloud really existed, in the sense of what we have today. But they offered basically almost like a private cloud because they were already interconnected to a lot of banks and financial services institutions, and they had this interesting product that they wanted to offer to customers, and they needed somebody to help sell that product from a technical perspective. And that's really what a sales engineering role is, and I'll talk more about it in a few minutes. After that, I went to a company called Noah Software, which was basically a partner of SAP, one of like 16 partners of SAP. SAP, for those that may not be aware, is one of the largest ERP software vendors based out in Germany, and they had 16, basically you could think of them as add-on products. One of them was Noah Software. It was a software that monitored how people are using and adopting SAP. A little bit of a monitoring, spying type of software that helped understand opportunities for improvement in terms of business process flow, but also helped identify potential issues like possible fraudulent fraudulent transactions and things like that. After that, and so what was interesting is, as part of our delivery for the Noah software, we were using cloud. So a lot of our proof of concepts, POCs, were done in Amazon Web Services. So that was my first experience using Amazon Web Services. I was using basic compute, like EC2 instances and storage, object storage with S3. Nothing too advanced, but we were, pretty early on, using AWS. When I first joined Noah Software, we had a couple of racks of of servers, and we quickly outgrew them, and it was much cheaper to just go to the cloud and more cost effective than trying to run your own colo facility. And then I got the opportunity to join Amazon Web Services, where I'm a solutions architect within our financial services practice. So I focus on helping customers move to the cloud, adopt the cloud, and I'll talk more about that. So that's kind of been my journey to the cloud. In terms of key areas, I will focus later on in the slides, like what are the key things that helped me prepare for this roles, both in terms of in college as well as some of the things I've done outside. But I'll be honest, right? Like nothing really fully prepares you. There's a lot of learning on the job, and that's totally normal. What I will say is I think some of my early learning opportunities, both through internships as well as just being able to work hands-on in computer labs and things like that during the college, definitely helped me. It definitely was something that I've used over time. So I thought I'd insert a joke here. So I don't know if you guys seen this, probably. What's the difference between an introverted engineer and an extroverted engineer? The extroverted engineer looks at your shoes when they're talking to you. The reason I bring this up, right, is there are different types of engineering roles, and this is not scientific by any means. I threw out some of the key roles that I see both at Amazon as well as many of our customers and things like that. I guess loosely you could say the ones on the left are kind of introverted roles, and the ones on the right are kind of extroverted. What I mean by that is the ones on the left is heads down kind of technology, very pretty much 99% technology focused. Whereas if you look at some of the stuff on the right side, there you're definitely having a blend between technology as well as business, right? And really understanding deeply the domain that you're trying to provide the product in. So on the left side, I'm not going to cover each one, but I think you're all familiar as DE. So there's different type of software development engineering roles. I didn't include all of them, but you could just you could get an idea. There's a front-end engineer, sometimes there is middleware engineers, sometimes there's even still COBOL engineers, which I'll talk about for mainframe, although I don't advise you to take COBOL right now. But all different types of software engineers. DevOps, this is super important. It really is a category of its own in terms of, either some depending, it really depends how organizations are structured. But even if often large organizations, even if they have, quote unquote, full stack engineering teams, there's still usually a DevOps engineering role. And then there's all sorts of supporting operational roles, everything from site reliability engineer. I think that's a term that Google coined, chaos engineering, cloud infrastructure architecture. These people are definitely much more focused on, I would say, um, the ops side of things, right? They may be doing, a lot of Python work, they may be doing scripting, but it's more from an operational side and kind of infrastructure management. Security, of course, is a category of its own. Lots of opportunity in security. We'll talk a little bit more about it in a couple of minutes, but I definitely encourage you guys to spend time on security. I think super important. Machine learning, of course, super important. Pretty much everything you're touching nowadays touches machine learning. And then on the right side, you're dealing with roles that are either in the area of development of products, right? So product management, technical program managers, these are folks that are actually, they own the product, they own the vision of the product, they develop the product based on a lot of interactions with customers, based on listening to customers, based on doing proof of concepts with customers, and supporting roles, right? Both in terms of architecture as well as on the sales side. Now, sales engineering is kind of clear, right? Sales engineering is part of technical sales. If you are you have a product that your company wants to sell, they need somebody technical to be able to explain the value of the product, to be able to demo the product, to be able to integrate with the product and do kind of that, technical deep analysis of the product. That's sales engineering. Solution architecture is a little bit different, and I'll talk about it. Technically, in many places, solution architecture falls under the quote unquote pre-sales or sales organization, but they're fundamentally different, right? Where, and especially in the context of cloud, you're not really focused as much on, on really the selling, but it's more about really enablement and helping the customer adopt the platform. And you're definitely going a lot more deeper and more technical than, I would say a sales engineer, which, is definitely, wearing that salesy hat. In Amazon, especially, we are, solution architects, even though, of course, we want people to use our platform and adopt our platform, but we really focus on not being, really salesy. We focus on long-term relationships and with our customers, and our focus is really adoption of the platform. And our focus is on architecture, good architecture. We have a concept called well architected, which means you're making sure that people are designing their systems in a highly reliable way, in a highly available way, lots of security built in, cost efficiently and well performant, right? So this is what the architects kind of focus on. And I'll give you some examples in a minute. There are also different subcategories of architects. You may have an architect that kind of focuses more on security, some focus more on machine learning, and so forth. So these are kind of some of the roles that you guys should be aware of. I encourage you to go to, an Amazon website, Google's, Azure, doesn't matter, and not just cloud providers. You could look at JP Morgan Chase and Goldman Sachs, and look at the engineering roles, right? And become familiar. And I think it also will give you an idea of what you may be interested in, right? Because you may not be aware of some of these roles that exist out there. So what I wanted to do is just give you an example. Okay, so what is a solution architect, role is, right? Because that's kind of the one that I'm most familiar with. And the way I kind of broke it down is I have 6 items here: help customers adopt the platform, design reference architectures, thought leadership, industry certifications, learn to be curious, and kind of manage time and priorities. I think, actually, you know what, one second, I think I have to reshare because I think I only shared PowerPoint. Give me one quick second. I'm just gonna reshare my screen again, because I wanted to show you a couple of things. What I did is I included links, and I'll make these slides available so you guys have the links to it. But what I did is, help customers adopt the platform. What does that really mean? I'm not going to go through this, but you could take a look at, this is a presentation that I did at one of our conferences with one of my customers, Vanguard. If you guys are familiar, Vanguard is one of the largest asset managers. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to move a highly monolithic platform to the cloud, right? So it's from mainframe to microservices, right? They're trying to take a mainframe-based platform architecture and they're trying to move it to the cloud. And we were trying to figure out what is the most effective way to do that, right? You're not going to move a mainframe to the cloud. Nobody actually supports that nowadays. So it's all about kind of replicating the data, taking the data from on-premise, from a mainframe, replicating it to a database or a data store in a cloud, building microservices around the new database that is being replicated, and going ahead and then basically creating new functionality, new capabilities for their customers, right? So if you want to create a new mobile app, you want to create a new capability in your web application, if you are hindered by the lack of flexibility from something like a mainframe, you could create an architecture which extends the mainframe into the cloud. Your system of record, your gold copy, still could be maybe in your data center in the mainframe, but now you have this additional system that you could build and use in the cloud. So that's what we do with solution architecture. What this means is, right, helping a customer like this move to the cloud. You basically just focus on the cloud, right? For the first, I would say, 2.5 years, 3 years of my career at Amazon, I was just, totally devoted to Vanguard. I used to travel there very often. I used to be on site several days a week, worked hand in hand with their architects, lots of whiteboarding, lots of evaluations, lots of proof of concept, trying to figure out, okay, in Amazon, we have a lot of different services. We don't have just one database. We have probably over a dozen different databases. So which database is the right choice? Which messaging platform is the right choice? Which compute platform, should you use virtual machines? Should you use containers? All of those decisions go into moving a customer to the cloud. So you spend a lot of time, your focus is 100% on the customer, making them successful, and to a point where they could really start adopting the cloud. So that's one big aspect of a solution architecture role. The second one is just designing reference architectures. What happens is we see patterns. Again, I'm not trying to showcase all the things for myself, but like this was the easiest. Like I just took things that I actually did. So this is a blog post on some of the patterns that we saw. We had customers that wanted to do advanced analytics on a couple of our services. So we have a service called DynamoDB, which is a NoSQL database service. NoSQL is a highly performant, highly scalable database in the cloud. And we have a service called Amazon Athena, which is a service that allows you to query data in our massively scalable object store. And we saw a pattern that we wanted to document and make a blueprint out of it, right? So this is all about how do you take data from that could be streaming in, how do you put it into something like a NoSQL database, which is highly performant, but also could be sometimes expensive, and you don't want to store your historical data here. So what we do here is we keep the data in DynamoDB in a NoSQL database only for a short amount of time so that your mobile application could use that data store. But then we offload the data, we move that data through a streaming pipeline to an object store. And once it's an object store, you could still query it, you could still run queries on it, but it's now historical. And this is much cheaper, this is much more cost effective. And now you have kind of your two tiers of storage. You have your more current data, which is in this high performant, super fast, super scalable NoSQL database. And you have your historical data in something like an S3 data store. Sometimes we also do just thought leadership, right? I work on financial services. One of the things that we focus a lot on is security. And we started seeing a pattern about, how do customers move like highly confidential data? What does it mean for a bank or for an asset manager to move highly confidential data to the cloud? So kind of took the lessons learned from a bunch of different customers and put together kind of framework how customers could use to determine what AWS services, for example, they could use in order to secure their data in the cloud. So we do a lot of writing, right? Which I'll talk about. Writing is super important. Even if you're computer science, make sure you focus on writing, and I'll talk about more of this. And there's a few other things. Industry certification, super important. Whether you're in the cloud, whether you're in security, whether you're in machine learning, there's all sorts of certifications. Certifications, I don't like just chasing certifications for certification's sake, but when you're working especially with customers and you want to make sure, you're working with your colleagues, you want to make sure that you have, um, you have attestations, right, in terms of your capabilities, in terms of your knowledge, and certifications is a great way to do that. Learn to be curious, super important. Every day we have to learn usually something new as solution architect. Um, the technology is evolving at a crazy, crazy pace. If you look at just the number of cloud services, right? When I started with Amazon Web Services 5 years ago, I think we had about 45 services. Right now, we have almost 200 services. So there's just a lot of things to learn all the time. And of course, managing time and priorities becomes super, super important. So hopefully this is just a little glimpse of what a solution architect does. I've been super happy and super lucky really to be in this role. At companies like Amazon, at companies like Azure and GCP, these could also just be career roles, right? The one thing I love about, in general, technology, you don't have to manage necessarily people to be very successful, both in terms of just progression in career as well as financially. I went previously from a position where I was managing about 20 people or so to just my own contributor, on purpose, right? And you could do that and be very successful, at a lot of these engineering companies. This is just another example. I'm not going to go through it too much, but this was an example where we had a customer that had to help them to redevelop some interesting kind of architectures in the cloud, take their on-premises data, and then kind of build all these digital microservices in the cloud. For the sake of time, I'm going to move on. So stuff you should be learning, right? And obviously, not everyone is going to go in computer science. Not everyone is into software development engineering. Not everyone is going to go into solution architecture. So I try to kind of, really focus on something I think that is important to everyone, right? So obviously, in terms of languages, I don't really care so much which language you focus on. I mean, I will tell you Java, JavaScript, those are super, super useful and popular. Python, of course, is important, especially in machine learning, Ruby, and there's a whole bunch of other things, right? It really is, it really depends on what you want to do. So just the main thing is be deep in a language. One or two languages you should know really, really well. Of course, there's C and C++, C and C++. I didn't even put it down here. I personally don't see a lot of C, C++, just kind of day-to-day, usage from my customers or from myself, just because we're more in doing like, application development, cloud services. I'm sure there's plenty of use cases still for C++ and C. The stuff that I've seen and the stuff that I use is more around Java and Python, predominantly. Algorithms, theory, machine learning, super important. Even if you do not want to become a machine learning person, learn machine learning. Machine learning comes up everywhere. So definitely super important to try to dive into machine learning as much as possible. I was speaking to some software engineers at Amazon, as well as some of my customers. A lot of organizations are going through a process where they're trying to embed machine learning into everything they do. Right. So even software development engineers are encouraged to use machine learning to help them better with their testing, to help them better with resiliency and things like that. So definitely focus on that. I put here just as some examples, networking security, super important nowadays, because what happens is with cloud, especially, there is a huge convergence between infrastructure and application development, right? When you work in most modern development shops, right? Goldman Sachs, at Amazon, at Google, it's not like you develop code and then you throw it over to somebody else to deploy it and then run it. You are what they call build it, run it shop, right? You are a 2-pizza team, we call it in Amazon. It's a small team that could be fed by 2 pizzas, and that team owns the application end to end. And what happens is you actually you're responsible for deploying the application. And what happens is I see this a lot, computer science folks, come out and they don't know anything about networking, but networking becomes important because you kind of are now in charge of deploying the infrastructure. So you need to understand how different, just the basics, right? I'm not saying you need to be super deep in knowing Cisco commands. That's not what I mean, but you should know what, IP is and IP ranges and how to divide subnets and what basic routing looks like. Security, super important, right? Application engineers nowadays are responsible for security. Communication and writing. I cannot I cannot tell you how important it is. One of the things that I constantly use is I got really lucky. I had really good writing teachers, and writing is so important. Being able, even if it's just, emails or just notes to your colleagues, clear communication is so vital. And writing properly. At Amazon, we are a big writing company. We do a lot of 6-pagers, 2-pagers constantly. So writing is super, super important. And I guess I put here a little bit less value or kind of more historical stuff. I mean, it's good to know some of that, right? But you're not going to need to know necessarily how Turing machines work or how circuitry works, unless you are a circuit engineer. Stuff you should be doing on your own, kind of following a very similar pattern from what I mentioned before, but you could do so much more on your own, right? Take some of the machine learning courses from Coursera. Andrew Ng, has some amazing courses online. Cloud, you could get free accounts on any of the 3 big cloud providers. Pick one, don't do all 3, just literally just pick one that you think you like. Get a free account. Make sure you configure alerting on budgets, because you could make a mistake and mistakenly spin something up and run it, and then you're going to owe money for that. So make sure you put some budgets on it. But there's a lot of free tier, right? I know Amazon, Azure, GCP, they all allow you to spin up some resources or use certain services for free. And of course, also speak to your university and see if you could get an account through the university on the cloud platform. DevOps, this is super important. This is something that I did not learn at school at all, even though it already started becoming used. But things like CI/CD pipelines, continuous integration, continuous deployment, tools like Jenkins, Bitbucket, Bamboo. If you don't know what these are, great, go learn, right? But if you're going to be doing software development engineering, you're not going to be going ahead and taking a jar file and manually moving it to a server. You're going to be using pipelines to build your jar file. You're going to be using pipelines to deploy your code. And even if you're not an expert in these tools, you should at least understand what they are. Security, just know the basics, understand what security is. One of the big questions on interviews a lot of times is, how does TLS work, right? You type in HTTPS, right? Try to explain to yourself, how does that work? What's the handshake? Who has the private certificate? Who has the public certificate? What actually happens in that TLS handshake? You should be able to answer that no matter what interview you go to. That's probably one of the top questions. Threat modeling, right? Do some research on what that is. And do projects. There are so many opportunities for projects and hackathons. Hackathons that happen on Sundays, hackathons that happen sometimes over an entire week. Amazing opportunities. Definitely look at that. Experience, super important as well. To be honest, from what I'm seeing nowadays, it's not even so much the company name that matters. It's really that you had a meaningful experience, right? And meaningful experience means that you could really put something on your resume that somebody could really go deep and discuss. It should be hands-on. It should be a project that you produce, something that you could take ownership of, and you could say, yeah, you did, not just your team did or a bunch of us did, something that you built yourself or you developed or you built. Something meaningful that you could really put on a resume and have a good discussion. Nowadays, a lot of interviews are basically situational based, like following a star pattern. So it's all about like tapping into your experiences and being able to explain what you've done, what were the challenges, how you worked around them. It's all situational. So the more kind of stories you have through real experience, the better. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm kind of going a little bit fast just because I realized I'm taking up, I think, a lot of time here. I spoke to our career team. They are, now is the time for 2021 internships at Amazon and AWS. They created this little splash screen stuff just for Yeshiva University, kind of for this event. But what I would encourage you could go to the site here and you could just register here. And the registering here just means that kind of Amazon is aware of you, and they'll send you, if there's interesting career opportunities that match your skills or your interest, they'll send you information. But then also these 2 pages over the next few weeks should have some roles. Obviously cannot guarantee anything, but if something looks good, definitely apply. I'm also open to, and you could speak to Todd if you guys want to, I could submit some references for you guys as well, if I get a chance to speak to some of you, especially if you're about to graduate, I would say towards the end of 2021. I think, let me know. Definitely check out these job sites and look at these roles. This is a slide that I got from our student development team, student internship team. It's a 12-week program. You work on a project alongside, 10 Amazonians, and it's a paid internship, and all sorts of different types of roles: product management, solution architects, software engineering, and cloud support associates. So check those things out. But to be honest, any internship, like I mentioned, as long as it's meaningful, doesn't really matter what the organization is. Definitely try to get one. All right. I think I'm at time, or maybe you've been a little over time, but
That's
I'm
quite
happy
all
to
right,
take
Ilya.
some questions if folks
Yeah,
have.
yeah, that's quite all right, Ilya. Thank you so much for that. I found it super informative. But yes, we absolutely do have some time for questions. If any students or anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand and speak on camera. Okay, I do have one that came into the chat. So what are some potential professional events to build my network in this virtual world?
Oh gosh, that's a tough one. So I would say definitely. So what role are you in? Are you a developer? Are you
Computer science, interested in software engineering.
software engineering?
Yep.
There are web-based events. It is tough. I will tell you, it's really tough, right? So if it wasn't for, obviously for this, there's also sort of meetups. We have all the cloud vendors, for example, have summits that happen in New York, and they have lofts which you could go and you could actually work and collaborate with people, even work there for free. And then of course a lot of organizations do the same. I still would think the best is some type of meetups. I will there are virtual events that I just happen to know the cloud space. So I know, like, in the cloud space, all the cloud companies are still doing a lot of virtual events. So we're doing still virtual summits. We're doing um, virtual symposiums and things like that. Um, the networking part is hard because you not all the platforms, depending on what you join, not all of them have collaborative aspects to it. Sometimes you just join, but you don't have an opportunity to collaborate. Sometimes you do. Um, Meetups, I think, are still important. There are a lot of meetups happening. In fact, in some areas, I've seen more meetups virtually. I know, like in financial services, I've seen a bunch of meetups recently. Um, if you're interested in like a certain industry, I would search. Sometimes it's not obvious. Sometimes it's not like, you're not just going to look for like a computer science meetup. Look for, like, I don't know, if you want to work, let's say, in financial services or health sciences, look for meetups in those areas, but focus on technology, right? A lot of them will be like, healthcare science technology meetups, or machine learning in financial services, or machine learning um, in automotive industry, right? Like, try to find those sometimes. Those could be opportunities, but I don't know. It's a good question. It's hard. Virtual is super hard.
Yeah, I hear you. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Another one that came in that's related, and maybe you could speak specifically to Amazon or some of your colleagues at other companies. Should we as students be anticipating a permanent virtual environment for the next few years in the tech industry?
That's a good question. I know some companies have really gone that way. Amazon has not made that type of an announcement at all. I will tell you personally, and I just had a good conversation with somebody else from one of the largest banks. Um, it's incredible how companies have adopted to remote. That is amazing. I will tell you, which is, nobody anticipated how well I think the adoption has gone. But I think the one area which is super hard still is onboarding of new people. I had an intern this year in our team, and then I had to onboard a new person that got hired a week before we got locked down. And we have like a very rigorous 3 to 6 month onboarding process. It's very hard. And it's really not fair also to the new kind of hires, right? Because they don't get the same opportunity to just talk to somebody in the hallway, to just do whiteboarding randomly. So I'm hoping that just from that perspective, just like, onboarding new people and getting them to be part of the teams, I don't see it, yet working well virtually. Everything else, like once, if you're part of a team, if you're already onboarded, if you've been, fully kind of integrated, then I think working remotely works relatively well. Uh, but I know like at Amazon, like a ton of us are itching to go back, right? Like we're just, and we have some opportunities where we could safely still do some meetings in the office here and there. We very little, but I know a lot of people are waiting to go back. So I don't think, even with all the hype and some companies announcing that they're gonna do remote, I can't imagine. That's just my personal kind of opinion.
Thank you very much. We have time for one more. Okay, last one. What is an overlooked trend in the tech industry that new hires and job seekers should be aware of when searching?
From what perspective, in terms of like what technologies or any specific?
Doesn't
Yeah.
specify.
Mhm.
But
Um,
let's go with technologies. The follow-up is in terms of knowledge and skills, if it's not something you already covered.
yeah, I mean, I think I covered a lot of that. I think what's happening nowadays, right? Um, Even if you're not going to work for a company that is in the cloud, at least the company is going through a digital transformation. Most organizations that I work with, even if they're not in the cloud, they're going through digital transformation. What that means is a lot of times, a lot of the silos are being broken. This the whole concept of kind of developers and operations and global IT, everything is blending, right? One of the things I super encourage you to do is um, read some of the books on oh my gosh, the DevOps handbook. I'm just looking at my shelf. The name escapes me of that famous book on DevOps. Um, but anyways, it'll come to me. But read some of the books, but understand like what DevOps is, right? Because what's going to happen is if you're just thinking you're going to be a developer and you don't need to know anything about operating your application or software, that doesn't exist now in most large organizations, right? Like nowadays it's the teams are you'll hear the term build it, run it shops, right? You build it, you run your software, you're going to be on calls, you're going to own your software, you're going to you're going to have to be responsible for the scalability of it. Chaos engineering, right? Look at those types of things. Chaos engineering, DevOps, um, uh, uh, automation, infrastructure as code. Those are all things you're going to need to know besides just knowing how to code something in Java, right? Because you're not just going to be able to, I mean, nowadays you're probably, developing a small Java program, you're putting it on a single machine and deploying it. That doesn't work, right? You need to learn about, you know, load balancers and scaling on demand, and being able to scale down and being able to, um, you need to know things like consistency and eventual consistency and strong consistencies. You need to know how your software operates in a real life, right? And that nowadays is falling on engineers as well, on developers, right? Whereas in the past, you may have had 5 different teams kind of owning the running aspect of your application. Um, so yeah, that's probably the biggest thing is DevOps is real and DevOps is here, and you'll even hear some cool terms like no ops, whatever. It doesn't matter, but bottom line is it's much more than just computer science nowadays.
Great, thank you. And one very last one, it's a follow-up question, actually from the chair of the computer science department at Stern College. How much of this did you learn in college, and how much of it did you actually learn on the job?
That's a great question. I would say, listen, there's certain technologies that just didn't exist in a college, right? So there's no question. All the cloud stuff I learned myself, but the foundational stuff was super important, right? Like I am trying to think about, uh, y- you know, OSI. Oh, you guys are maybe some. Anyone here knows what OSI layer is? OSI layers, the 7 layers of OSI. No. Okay, you should, right? It's foundational stuff you learn, maybe not in computer science, you learn this in networking, right? You learn this in data communications. It's about how do you, you have the bottom layer is kind of the physical layer of the fiber, and then the top layer is the application layer, and then the presentation layer. And then there's things in between like TCP/IP. Those foundational concepts come into play like all the time, because when you're troubleshooting a very complex trading platform and you're trying to understand where you're having latency issues, right? In the trading, you have, latency requirements of, single digit millisecond latency, and you're trying to figure out where the problems are. Is it in your application? Is it in memory? Is it on the network stack? Is it in the fiber? Is it in, in the way you wrote your Java code? Those foundational pieces like that you learned in basic, C++, C development, basic networking, basic data communication, you use it all the time, right? So for the foundational stuff, don't dismiss it, right? Don't dismiss the foundational elements. They will just help you learn, right? But you absolutely need to learn, and you need to get into a habit of learning new things. We do this at Amazon as solution architects. One day a week, usually, we try to carve out a good, several hours of just not doing anything other than learning something new, right? You should do the same thing, right? Instead of doing, I wish I could say Friends reruns. You guys don't do that anymore. You probably, I don't even know what you guys watch, but instead of doing that, just go ahead and spend 2 hours on machine learning, spend 2 hours on DevOps, build a Bamboo pipeline, build a machine learning algorithm, right? Like do something new every single day, right? But I don't miss the foundational stuff. You're always going to tap into it.
Ilya, thank you so much for your time tonight. It was
Sure.
wonderful. I'm sure I'm going to hear from students that were attending tonight, and I'll be in touch. If
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Good luck.
We're giving you a round of virtual applause right now.
Thank you. Take care, guys. Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
And with that, I'm very excited to move on to the next portion of the program, which is our tech panel. All 5 panelists are here, I believe. So we'll get right to it. So I do have a preset set of questions here, but if any questions from the audience do come up while the panel is going on, please feel free to put them in the chat, either to everyone or to me privately, and I'll make sure that they get answered. So first, let's start with the introductions. Brielle, why don't we start with you?
Hi, my name is Brielle Broder. I graduated from Stern in January last year. I am now working at Bloomberg.
Great. And what's your role at Bloomberg?
I'm a software engineer in trading and analytics, specifically working on the execute management system.
Excellent. Thank you. Kayla? Kayla, are you here?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, now we got you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kayla. I work at UBS, and I'm what's called a GTP analyst, which is essentially a graduate rotational program where I got to spend 9 months on either 2 separate teams or 6 months on 3 separate teams. So I just started a new team last month on the fixed income team, but my role is primarily software engineering and computer science and data analytics.
Great. And how long have you been at UBS?
A year.
Great. Thank you so much. Avi?
Hi, my name's Avi. I graduated from YU about 7 years ago. Right now, I'm working at Facebook. I've been here for about 2 years now. I'm an internal software engineer, and our team is focused on building productivity tools for our business and sales orgs.
Great, thank you. Emma?
Hi, everyone. My name is Emma Peck. I am currently an early career recruiter here at Broadridge. So I recruit primarily across the tech and non-tech industries for our intern program, as well as entry-level programs and building out relationships with different universities.
Amazing. And could you just give like a super brief overview of what Broadridge is?
Yeah, absolutely. So Broadridge is a fintech company. We're working on the back end of everything. So we're really working primarily in the financial communications and financial solutions industry. So we're kind of that biggest company you haven't heard of. Our clients are going to be the Bank of America, the JP Morgan, 98% of the banks and brokers. So we're really working on the back end of those type of companies, working with their shareholders to provide them, different solutions, and just working on any kind of solutions that they would need just to really better help their relationship with their clients and make them a little bit more technically progressed.
Great, thank you so much. And last but certainly not least, Eli.
Hey everyone, I'm Ali Salem, currently YC student studying mathematics with a concentration in computer science. Luckily, I'm also in the BA/MA program at YU, so I'm actually currently taking graduate studies that give me credit both towards my undergraduate degree and towards my graduate degree, and hopefully I'll be getting also a master's in mathematics with a concentration in financial engineering. I have experience interning both at a service venture capital firm in Israel, and this past summer I was continuing my research with Standard & Poor's Global Market Intelligence team, working on some topological data analysis.
Great, thank you so much. So now that we have introductions, let's get to know each of you a little bit better. So for the alumni, I guess tell us all a little bit about what led to where you are today. And I guess we'll start with Avi because you've been out 5 or 6 years or so, and you have a very interesting background. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I was in YU and I majored in computer science. I did a year abroad in Israel. I went to OJ, and then afterwards went right to YU for 3 years. After that, I got my first job at NASA. So I was working in the Upper West Side actually, which isn't too far away. And over there, I was working on climate modeling. It was a really interesting role where a lot of the work that we did wasn't the type of work that's going to generate tons of revenue or anything like that, but it's the type of work that you feel really good about. You come home and you're making the world a better place. You're trying to provide. Our team was responsible for kind of making the climate data more readable and friendly to people who weren't climatologists, and so I had the opportunity to work with a lot of really cool people, some of the leading climatologists, physicists, mathematicians, and we kind of worked with them to build tools around our climate model. After that, I was reached out to by Facebook, and the opportunity caught my attention for a very similar reason. The team that, or the role that they were interested in was one where we were also, the goal was to make the world a better place as well. So I think, the theme throughout my career hasn't necessarily been it's more been about passion for me, working at places that I'll enjoy and that I feel like I'm making an impact on the world. And so I've been at Facebook since then, for the past 2 years out in California.
It's quite a change from NASA to Facebook, which is amazing. But thank you for sharing that. Brielle, how about you? I understand that you had a couple internships while in school, and then your first job was actually at a totally different organization, Bloomberg. So tell us a little bit about that path.
Sure. So I had started Stern in January, which means my first summer afterwards, I only had 1 semester under my belt. So that first summer, I worked at a startup. And what I always like to say about it was that it was such a startup that we didn't even have an office. It was literally 2 people and me, each working from our homes. And that was really great just because I got to do a lot. And already just 1 semester in, I already had an internship on my resume. This next 2 summers, I was at Google in California at their Sunnyvale campuses. And those were really exciting opportunities for me. I got to learn a lot my first summer. I was actually working on an open source project of Google's, which is fantastic for someone who wants to be able to then show people later what you've done, because I was actually allowed to. From there, when I actually had to look for jobs, then it came time to take in all of these other factors like location, what kind of environment I wanted to be in, things like that. So when it came time for that, Bloomberg seemed like the best option for me, and I've been really happy there. I only started during the pandemic, so I actually haven't been in office though. So it's a little bit different than I had been anticipating.
Great, excellent. Could you tell us a little bit about exactly what you're working on at Bloomberg?
So my team specifically works on how traders and people who are working on buy and sell side applications and things like that actually do the things that they do and do it most efficiently. So things that my team work on primarily stems from the fact that Bloomberg has existed for, well, longer than I've been alive. So as they build out different services, and each time doing so with the state of technology at that time, even if the services are similar, the technology ends up looking very different, which isn't helpful for anyone. So my team is kind of going through and saying, how can we update everything and make this brand new thing that people are comfortable with, but really feels modern and effective?
Thank you. Kayla, so how did you end up at UBS and FinTech?
So I guess it was more untraditional. I thought I was going to be a mechanical engineer and build the next Iron Dome. But I went to Technium for a year, came back, finished up and graduated from YU after 2 years. And then I had a lot of miscellaneous internships in UCLA and USC in the physics department and in the in the mechanical engineering department. And those all led to a really change in, I guess, career perspective when I got an internship at UBS going into my senior year. And I thought it would be a really interesting and great way to understand really the science that no one has really been able to fully comprehend, which is economics. Just understanding how just a slight wave could really turn everything over, and how big waves surprisingly don't even cause anything to happen at all. And I wanted to have more of that perspective and insight. And then I started at UBS, and it's great.
And have you held two roles there? Was first as an entry-level analyst, and now you're the GTP, or?
So the intro-level analyst is the GTP program. You get hired, right? So they don't really, I know it's kind of strange, they don't really hire people straight from university. It's usually going to be somebody who has like 3 to 5 years. That'll be like, at least in my experience, I have actually conducted interviews, which is kind of strange when you have a bachelor's and you're interviewing people who have like 2 PhDs, and they're like, so like, why are you interviewing me? But the opportunity is there's a big push for young talent, and to try to give graduates the tools and the right kind of lessons in order to make a profitable and really strong career to do whatever you want to do. There's surprisingly a lot of opportunities in the financial industry to focus on items outside of just strictly finances, whether it's startups, or if you even investing in energy and other meaningful areas. And so I started off in what's called the QED team, which is Quantitative Evidence and Data Analytics team, which is a 2-year-old team that is trying to modernize UBS's systems with their strong reliance on just Excel, and try to update it and modernize it.
Thank you. And now, Ellie, you're still currently a student in 2 schools, both YC and CATS, but you do still have quite a bit of experience that's led up until this point. So if you can kind of walk us through that a little bit, and also just tell us a little bit about what a topological data analyst does, specifically at S&P.
All right, so just to start off, for all those students that are really worried about getting great internships to start, after I think my freshman year, I was a marketing and sales intern working with the sales team, very basic stuff for someone who, I thought I was studying mathematics and finance. I should be getting, data analyst spot or IB internship. So, sometimes things take time. You don't have to be getting the best internship just to start. And then the following summer, I went on a program in Israel working for a service venture capital firm, where there, I guess I got most of my hands-on skills and experience. I worked directly with the CFO, and we actually took, extracted all the data from multiple venture capital firms in Israel. They had more than half of the market, taking all of their, cap tables, all of their portfolio summaries, all of the, budgets, and actually organized all the data into a single database and uploaded it into a graphic interactive platform called Power BI. It's actually a Microsoft platform, and that we actually represented to the GPs and the LPs of all these venture capital firms. So for me, that was more of the financial side, studying that financial passion I have. And then more of the tech side would be this past summer working for S&P. We actually worked on CDS and equity data. So CDS is a credit default swaps. They usually represent risk between corporations taking out loans. So we actually took all that data, and the topological data analysis is actually something that's being discovered through one of the head data scientists at S&P, and actually the head of the CAT's math program, Dr. Gidea. So originally I had a plan to work for the Dow Jones this past summer, and then the pandemic hits. And luckily through the CAT's program, I had the opportunity to work for this capstone project. So we're working on topological data analysis, which is pretty much we use an machine learning algorithm that takes off the CDS and the equity, prices of all these corporations and through 11 sectors of, the United States markets. And we're actually analyzing, hopefully, a new econometric, predictor for falling markets, which he's published papers with both, cryptocurrencies in 2008 crash. And currently from now throughout the year, I'm going to be doing it also with global markets and seeing how we recover from COVID.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So now we've heard from these great, this great student and alumni and their success. Now, Emma, you're on the other side, recruiting, not just from YU, but from other schools as well, I assume. So what are you really looking for in students or early career alumni, in internships and full-time jobs? How do they get noticed? Because I'm assuming you get potentially, hundreds of candidates for certain roles and things like that. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I still think that events like this are great, even if we are virtual or in person, because again, like you said, we do get hundreds and hundreds of applicants. But it's great for me when someone makes an effort to attend one of our virtual sessions, because then it helps to put a face to the name. And then when I am kind of going through the candidates, because we go through them all individually. I know we don't have kind of a screener that goes through and cancels people out, so it's all kind of done by hand, just to make sure that we really are giving everyone the due diligence. So it's great for me because then I can say, oh, you know what? I remember meeting so-and-so at this event. We had a great conversation. So I would tell everyone just to continue to coming to events like these, because even though they are virtual, they're absolutely still worthwhile. I think that makes a big difference. Resume is always going to be a big thing for me. Formatting and making sure that everything looks neat and professional is huge. Even something as small as making sure that your resume is in a PDF format. I personally think that goes a long way. That's something I like to see. It's just a little bit cleaner and you don't have to worry about the formatting that sometimes happens with Word documents. Being well-rounded, involved in extracurricular activities is always going to be great. I do like to say probably quality over quantity, as opposed to maybe being involved in a bunch of different things. Maybe try focusing in on one or two, and that way you can maybe be on a leadership position within that club. So as opposed to listing out 10, I'm more impressed when I can see maybe two, but that person is saying, oh, I actually was on the board, I was the president or the vice president. I love to see things like that. At Broadridge, in addition to people being, strong coders, we really are looking for people that have strong communicative skills as well. And for someone that is showing that on their resume, that's going to be a big indicator to me. Okay, you know what? If this person can lead a club, I can see them, being able to be a future leader at Broadridge and being able to be, effectively communicate with other teams.
Thank you. And I just want to pick up on a point that our keynote mentioned earlier. He said that, at least as far as Amazon is concerned, the experience on a resume is much more important than somebody doing an internship at Google or something like that. If a student can really communicate what they've done in school projects or on their own and things. So how do you kind of weight those sorts of things?
I would say, an internship is always going to be valuable, but I also want to say, if you're not able to get an internship, as long as you're able to kind of showcase your skill sets in other ways in terms of class projects and things like that, I think that's great. I don't want to discount internships. I think that's always going to be a big thing for folks because that's something that hiring managers are really going to grab onto because they're going to say, okay, they've had, real time on the job experience. So I think that internships are really never going to be replaced in that way. But I always tell students, if they're coming in and if I'm meeting with them over their resume, if they weren't able to get an internship, talk about your relevant projects, anything you've been doing in school. But also, if you are working, even if you're working while you're going to school or just working over the summer, that's important to note there as well. So I've definitely interviewed people that they weren't able to have an internship, but they they were working in a restaurant or something else during their whole time in school. I think don't discount that because companies are going to appreciate that. Like, okay, the student has to, continue to work, to afford their school and just things like that. I think never want to discount, that kind of hustler. So to say that's important to me as well, but internships are always great.
Thank you. So now that we've talked about, the resume and getting the interview and things like that, I'd like to talk about the hiring process at each of your respective organizations, and in some case, multiple organizations. In the case of Avi or Brielle, who's held at different companies. But Kayla, let's start with you. What was the hiring process like at UBS? Do you feel you were prepared? And if not, what do you think you could have done to better prepare?
It's funny. I mean, I obviously think I was prepared because otherwise they wouldn't have hired me. But and of course you could always be more prepared. The hiring process is pretty straightforward. Well, first of all, everyone should have a really good relationship with their professors. Even if it's not your typical career path, you have no idea what opportunities are like revealed just by being courteous and saying hello to your professor and thank you. And that goes a long way. And that is also how that's one of the ways, there was a professor who showed that there was an internship opportunity at UBS, and I was one of many who applied for that position. And then there were 3 interviews, and yeah, and that was it. It was pretty, and then I guess there was the internship, which they call a 10-week interview process, which was pretty tough because you want to be the first one in, last one out. You've got to work really hard to show that you're eager and positive and that you really want that position. And I guess the best way to prepare is to always work at it, to always just say that this is really what I want, and to continuously do that, because even in a regular job, even when you're a full-time hire, you're kind of still in an interview process. Like, you're interviewing for your next position, you're interviewing for your next pay raise. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Brielle, let's talk about Google and Bloomberg. How are the hiring processes similar? Anything you wish you knew ahead of time?
I think one thing I would say about both is don't feel that you need to check your personality at the door. Places really want to hire the whole you. They're not looking to hire a robot. So when you go into interviews, when you write various application pieces, really just bring as much of yourself as you can. For my first internship at Google, that was the only one I had to interview for. That one we had to answer 5 questions, and for better or for worse, I wrote them at 3 a.m. So when I read them back the next day, they were really very intense, a little funny, but really showed a lot of my personality. And that later came up during my interviews as something that, I'm not just someone who's going to copy from a textbook. And when they're asking me about my favorite programming languages and I'm complaining to no end about the brackets and the semicolons in Java, they get to know a little bit about who I am through that. And I think that's something that really served me well there. With Bloomberg, I probably did the worst thing you can do at an interview is accidentally walk out, like just totally leave the building. So Bloomberg does 2 interviews that they tell you about, and then there are another 2 that if you do well, they then have you meet with someone from HR and just someone to kind of talk to you about the process. But if you don't really know that, you might think you can leave, which especially in a finance company that has a lot of security, you're really not supposed to do. So once I found out that I wasn't supposed to have left, when they called me an hour later, being like, Brielle, where are you? Your next interview has started. I kind of went, oh, well, guess I'm not getting the job. That definitely wasn't the case. We ended up rescheduling for a month later, but kind of keeping up that positive attitude. You know what? I tried. I didn't realize I was supposed to stick around, and now there's a new rule that interviewees can't be left alone in case they leave. But it just becomes a funny story and it all works out. So even if something disastrous happens, it's not the end of the world. Companies understand that you're human and they want that.
Very well done in changing that policy for Bloomberg. Avi, anything you'd like to add with NASA and Facebook? I imagine those were pretty interesting experiences.
Yeah, I'll start with the Facebook kind of process. So initially, Facebook starts off with a initial screen with the recruiter who will just kind of gauge your, your interests and try to see if you'd be a good fit for the company. A big part of getting through that is being a good storyteller, right? So making sure that you can talk about your experiences. And kind of talk about them in a way where they fit the job title and kind of the interests that you have and your passions as well. A key thing that Facebook looks for is authenticity. So bring your authentic self to the interview. Don't have any sort of imposter syndrome, which is what we call when you think you're not good enough or you don't have the confidence. So definitely come with your authentic self. Now that doesn't mean come in like knowing being everything type of person, but definitely bring yourself to the interview. After that, they'll have a technical interview, which is usually a screening interview with one person, and it's usually a technical question. That's really strictly to gauge your technical abilities before they bring you on site. Once they bring you on site, there's a panel of 5 different interviews that take place. 2 of them are ninja interviews. So you'll meet with some mid-level engineers, and they'll kind of want to understand how you break down and solve a problem. Again, when you're solving the problem, it's not just about getting the correct answer. They're gauging other signals as well, like how you communicate, how you think logically, how you're able to explain concepts. So you definitely want to be a good storyteller during the solving of the the technical interviews as well. Then there'll be an XFN interview, which is basically with the business or business folk or a designer who will kind of gauge your technical critical thinking skills. Not really from a technical standpoint, but more from a problem solving standpoint. So there won't be any coding involved there. And then you'll have a system design interview, which is pretty consistent with a lot of how the companies bring students in for these types of loops is just a standard system design interview. Well, you'll want to be able to break down systems end to end. And you don't need to have done this in the past, but you definitely want to review and practice this. And there's a lot of good books out there like Cracking the Coding Interview, which will kind of teach you a lot of the themes. And there's a lot of keywords that you'll want to make sure that you understand and concepts that you want to understand about how systems work, how they scale, how you can make them more performant and things like that. And then after that, you'll meet with the hiring manager if you make it through. And then after that, you either get the offer or not. But and at NASA it was pretty similar, but not as rigorous. There was only 3 rounds at NASA. The 2 of them were coding, and one was more of a person. They're trying to gauge your communication and personal skills. But I think all in all, the most important things for these interviews is first of all be very confident in your technical abilities. So you want to make sure that you study and you practice problem solving on LeetCode and all these kinds of websites to ensure that you're able to solve the problems methodically. And then the second piece is storytelling. So even when you're solving problems, you don't want to do it, in your own head. You want to be able to talk out loud while you're doing it. And even when you're talking about your projects or personality questions or trying to gauge or they're trying to gauge various signals, you want to be able to tell a story that makes sense and fits the types of questions that they ask with your experience, drawing from the experiences you've had.
Good stuff. Thank you very much. Emma, so how does it work at Broadridge?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first step for us is a hire view. So for anyone that's not familiar, those are the online digital interviews. I kind of think of them as maybe like a one-sided Skype. They have become, I'm assuming, a lot more popular these days. We have been doing it for quite some time. So basically, you will be prompted with questions, and then you'll have about 3 to 4 minutes to answer the questions, depending on what they are. They're typically more behavioral based. I always tell students I think they're much more nerve-wracking than they actually are. Everyone feels a little bit awkward doing them, but really don't worry too much about them. So that is the first step of our process. For some of our roles, we do have a codility test that's also kind of done similarly through HireVue, where we send our candidates a link and then they're able to complete those. And then for our entry level programs, if this is for a senior that's interviewing, typically our interviews are with a panel. So we have folks that interview based on different competencies, leadership, behavioral, and technical skills. So, because again, like I said earlier, for a lot of our positions, especially at an entry level, we are looking for that combination of soft skills and technical skills. And then typically, an interview with one of our executive teams. For our intern program, it is similar. Again, the hire view process, and that usually takes the place of kind of that initial screening, and then it would be a video interview with a couple members of the team. And I also want to add, I really appreciated all the things that Avi was saying about imposter syndrome. I think that is such an important concept and something that I actually have been noticing coming up a lot more often, just in my conversations, with candidates or some of our interns. So I think that was, a really great point to make. And confidence is obviously the most important things. And then now that we all are interviewing in a technical environment, I think, use it to your advantage, take advantage of being able to have, notes out and kind of set to the side. And the biggest thing is, just making sure to practice those links ahead of time. And then when it comes to your interview, you are yourself's biggest advocate and you should be an expert on who you are. So I always just try and tell people that, you know best about yourself. So just kind of keep those things in mind, and then just kind of being overall, prepared to speak to, the technical skills, and make sure that everything is on your resume. I can't tell you how often I meet with people and they tell me some really cool thing. And I'm like, that's not in your resume. They said, oh, well, I'm not sure if I should put it in. So when in doubt, definitely I would say put it on, especially if it's something that, displays you in the right light, because that I do notice that a lot, with little things like leadership or, being involved in clubs and things like that. So.
Thank you. And on that note, I actually did get a question in the chat from an attendee, and I'll ask you, Emma, since you're in HR, do we need to have exactly all of the technical skills listed in a given job description when applying?
No, not necessarily, at least at an entry level. So I would say, if you have at least a couple of them, like maybe say there's 4, 3 out of 4, I think that's fine. Because typically, they're just kind of looking for those keywords when they are interviewing. So I would say usually, at least when we put our job descriptions, we have a list of required languages and then preferred. So you can always look at that as well. And the preferred is something, if you have it, that's great. But I would say it's always fair to put your hat into the ring. And, we do expect that the people that we bring in, as long as they have those basics, the basics when it comes to languages, we're able to kind of build upon those.
Thank you so much. Just to switch gears a little bit, Ellie, I know you mentioned that, you're part of the Pathways program at YU. I'm not sure everybody attending tonight knows what that is. So could you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so generally what it is that, CATS and YU are together, that they offer undergraduate students the opportunity to start their graduate degrees a little bit. Generally it's supposed to be for seniors, but, depending on how quickly you work with your courses, I was lucky enough to start my second semester as a junior. started taking, graduate courses. And when it comes to these courses and, what you're going to go into is your master's degree, it's more based off, what you want to learn, what your passion is, and you can choose from, a sector of whatever it is that you're going after, your career path. So, I know a lot of people complain about undergraduate degrees. Sometimes with the electives and core is not exactly what they want. So luckily, I work with Dr. Gidegea, who's the head of the mathematics program at CAS that's actually running the BAMA, that he gave me the opportunity to really, shape my master's the way I want it to be. So for financial engineering, that's consistent of both, data analytics, computer science courses, mathematics, and kind of, an econ track. So for me, I'm kind of pickpocketing whatever classes it is that I feel are most necessary for, my career path, and taking the guidance of both him and other professors within the master's program that really helped me just, line up what I can do and what I look into. And also through these classes, I can see, what is it that I really do like, because, being a student right now, I'm still not 100% sure whether in fintech, if it's going to be more of, an IB kind of career path, or more financial engineering, quant side. So, taking all of those classes, whether you're going to pursue the full on the master's once you graduate or whether you're not, it's really great to get some graduate courses under your belt and to also interact with all of those professors and all of the students who are in the master's program.
Excellent. And on that note, I know you kind of mentioned you're still exploring things. It sounds like you're doing a wonderful, effort doing that. What ultimately do you want to do after graduation? And if you're not sure, that's okay.
Listen, we plan and God laughs, but at the end of the day, I do hope to be somewhere in financial technology. Right now, after especially, my project and research at the S&P, I definitely realize, how interested I am and how passionate I am, not just both like the finance side, but also algorithmic and just mathematical problems, complex solutions. I like really, hard logic thinking and really, bugging. And within that idea of logic thinking and mathematics, also having the financial side to the back of it. Because, for example, with my, internship in Israel, the whole interview was actually just done over the phone. But the main basis of our conversation was me understanding both the financial side and the data side of the project we were going to pursue. So if you can't understand the data that you're working with, then, you might not be able to apply your skills or apply your knowledge to the highest level. So luckily with the experience I gained, I hope to, pursue something within the quantitative side of finance.
Thank you so much for sharing.
No problem.
And just in the interest of time, I'm going to ask one more question of the entire panel, and I'd like to get everybody's input on it. But for the attendees, I do have some questions coming in here through the chat, so please do feel free to add them in before we wrap up, because I want to make sure everybody gets the information that they need. So last question, I'll pose it to everybody. Just what is that one last parting piece of advice you would like to give students, to help them be successful, in the industries that you all work in. And Kayla, I'll put you on the spot and start with you.
So sorry. Do you mind repeating the question? I was reading the chat.
That's okay. That's okay. So what is the one parting piece of advice, you would give students to help them be successful in the industries that all of you work in?
Just look for opportunities to learn and to be challenged and remain positive.
Thank you. Avi?
Yeah, I would say focus on getting some practical experience under your belt if you can. It doesn't need to be a big company. It's sometimes startups pose the best opportunity to kind of learn the full stack and get the best skills that you can, and then also practicing coding questions and those types of riddles, I would say, is also very, very important.
Thank you. Riel?
Okay, I'm going to cheat and say two things.
Please.
The first one is a reference for anyone who's played Among Us, which if you haven't, look it up and then play and then thank me next week. So in this game, there's the crewmates and then the imposters, and this ties in really well to imposter syndrome, because in the game, it's not a bad thing to be an imposter. You just need to get away with it. So if you're worried that, you're actually a fraud and really you didn't deserve this position, that's on the company. You just do your best and, oh, well, you get the job, you get the raise and all of that. So don't worry about not being up to par. Someone else will take care of that for you. The other thing I would say is be very enthusiastic and show that you actually care, even if you have no idea what you're talking about. And this can be in an interview or actually day to day, because there will be times that you really just don't know the answer. So as long as you show that you are someone that people want on their team, they'll want you on your team.
Thank you. Ellie, any parting words?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to also steal like Brielle and give two. So first, I just want to say that, you might be discouraged by what people are asking for or what, people are expecting from you. Going into my research with S&P, one, I didn't even know what topology meant. And also the whole project was in our studio, which I did not know how to code in. I took on the opportunity. I learned fairly quickly, put in a lot of work in a short amount of time, and was able to, thank God, take on the, research very seriously. So don't be discouraged. Be ready to learn things on your own. That's what it's all about, really pickpocketing like what it is that you want to learn and actually learning it on your own. And, don't be afraid to just be locked into whatever school's offering. And then on top of that, just for career path searching, I know, people discuss software engineering, they discuss financial technology. Within those career paths, those sectors, there is infinite amount of jobs and positions. Search what positions offer what kind of daily life, what kind of work, what specific skills they have, and think about what skills you have and what you would be best fit for. Because only through really reading about what day-to-day work is like in these industries will you know what you want to be doing. And then from there, choose that niche and just focus on self-studying that niche and being the best person in that specific position you could possibly be.
Thank you. Emma?
Well, these are all great. So I really love that all the things that everyone else is saying. So I would say probably like one or two things, but again, to be your own biggest advocate. I can't tell you how often I see someone, maybe they were an intern and then they'll share with me, oh, like I had such a good time. Like I really hope that there's a position, in this, department. I would love to come and work for them. I'm saying, that's so great. I'm glad you're telling me that, but like, have you raised your hand and told your manager? Be your own advocate, constantly, make your interest aware, don't expect that people are always going to know, that you're going to be looking for, say, this raise, this promotion, or this job opportunity. Always be, more and more communicative and letting your manager know that you are up for this next challenge. And so I would just say kind of constantly raising your hand for things, whether it's, if you're an intern or whether you're in full time. For me, something that I've noticed is kind of going off what Brielle has been saying, in terms of enthusiasm, that really does make a difference. I have had people that maybe they weren't the best technically, but they made themselves someone that the team wanted to be around. And kind of similar to how in, university extracurricular things are always great. For me, I've noticed a lot that people that I've hired, the ones that tend to get involved in other things at the office, it really helps put them in a different position, because maybe they'll have met a hiring manager at, a networking event that they volunteered to do. And it actually gives them exposure to those. So those kind of things actually don't just end in college. They expand into the corporate world as well.
Thank you. So that does it for my questions. We do have time for one or two in the chat, and we had one come in earlier. I'm not going to address this to anyone in particular, but maybe Emma would be the best person. But I think the alumni and Ellie might be able to answer as well based on their experience in their organizations. But what are some possible roles one can have in the tech industry where one doesn't deal with coding and data, but is still dealing with tech? Anyone want to take that one?
I would say at Broadridge, role, now more and more, most roles, even on the business side, it's helpful to have some knowledge of tech. We have a lot of roles more on the back end. Project manager is a big one, where you'll be working with some of our technical analysts, but you might not be doing coding and things like that, on a day-to-day basis. So I see that to be a popular one, and kind of being that go-between between the business side and the technical side.
Thank you. Avi and Ellie, I saw your mute go off. Anything to add?
I was actually just going to say, so the position I was going to have before the pandemic hit at Dow Jones was actually a tech product internship. So it wasn't going to be any coding backside it. It was mostly just, for the Dow Jones, they were, trying to push their newsletter and their app side and kind of just bringing the financial media side to consumers. So there is a lot of tech that, you know, you can understand how these platforms work and how to help design them just based off what you think would look best, not necessarily you being able to code all of it. So, you know, don't be afraid to really look into tech internships that don't necessarily need coding backgrounds. And also on the financial side, you know, that's just for me personally, there's also a lot of opportunities where, you know, you could be kind of helping on the tech side, but not knowing how to code. So like stuff in IB, and just like I said, looking for specific positions, you know, within each career path. But there's plenty of jobs definitely like within tech that you don't need to be coding.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I was just going to say very similar to what Emma already shared. PM and TPM roles, there's no coding involved in either of those roles, and no expectation that you're going to code. But both of those roles are heavily involved in the product. So it's product managers, so they have to know the ins and outs of the products, and you know, sometimes they run queries as well to get data and things like that. But they're much more involved in the product vision, the product planning, and like the product roadmap, and ensuring that the team is able to hit their goals.
Thank you. And last question, because we're right up against 9 o'clock, came in the chat, but I'm going to alter it a little bit. So it's, how do you cold call contact someone at a place you want to work without asking for a job or being too forward? I'm going to edit that to, you know, I'm sure all of you at some point are contacted by students or, you know, other individuals on LinkedIn. So, you know, Bria, I'll ask you, you know, how do you prefer somebody do that outreach? Like, what wording do you look for, you know, just to, you know, give the impression that it's somebody that you generally want to talk to than somebody that's just making the rounds contacting everybody?
So I actually don't tend to have people reach out to me on LinkedIn if they're serious and contacting me specifically. So if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, I won't see it for a month. But I have people all the time who WhatsApp me and ask me about referrals, and I'm so happy to do it, given that I actually know anything about their coding or anything. So if I've ever done a project with you, or we even discussed things and I've talked to you about your homework, then already I can write something in a referral that will hopefully help, because I want to be able to help. Of course, I want YU grads to succeed. So if you can send a sample or anything like that so that I can get to know you and put in the best reference, that would be great for everyone.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add to that?
Sure. So I've had people cold call me on LinkedIn, and I haven't seen it. So they've had to like tell the people who referred them to look at LinkedIn. But what I look out for is an actual like connection. YU would be one. If somebody from YU were to say, hey, I would like to, you know, learn more about UBS or about your experiences, that'd be one. But generally, like somebody who comes from like a random school that I have no affiliation with, and they'll say, hi, can I talk to you? I probably wouldn't answer them. And the way it would work, I guess, is, you know, I've met people for coffee at the UBS building, and then, you know, they send me their resume and I look at it, and if I think it's something that would be a good fit, then I send it to HR and say, hey, is there anything available for this person? Or I'll send it to somebody else that I know in the system and say, I know that you're looking for X, and I think this would be a good fit. And then I would send the resume over. But yes, it's really good to network and to try to have that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And with that, it is 9:01, so we're relatively on time. I'll take that extra minute for all the knowledge that we got from everybody here. But on behalf of everybody here, thank you so much to the panelists. I'm sure everyone took away a lot from this. I know I did. I was taking my notes, and you know, I don't deal directly with students all the time in my role, but I certainly work very closely with the career advisors that do. So this knowledge is definitely going to be shared beyond, you know, just those that are attending tonight. So again, thank you so much. This concludes the program for the evening. If anybody has any questions on the student side, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'd happy to help and make any referrals. And with that, I will say good night. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you.
Thank you.